Here's a question we get a lot, and that is why there's so many kinds of brushes. And this person says, I want to learn oil painting, but I have no idea which brushes I need. Well, I guess it's about time for us to address brushes. The only reason I can come up with why there are so many kinds of brushes is because there are so many kinds of artists. But originally, our artists started out with very few brushes, and we've discovered over the years that there are some standard brushes that can do the job for us, and we really don't need all the specialty brushes. But I don't know an artist who's not a brush addict like me. Here's two containers of my oil brushes. These are not all the brushes I have, but they're a good representation of what I mean when I say that painters are addicted to brushes. Well, let's look at what brushes will do. I'll show you something of what brushes will do, some brushes will do, and what you will need. And now most of you are probably already deep into oil painting, and you already have your favorite brushes, but let's just take a look at this. For one thing, we have the kinds of brushes, and there are many. The traditional brushes are flats, brights, filberts, and rounds. Those are, you might say, the original first brush, I think, was a round brush, the first brush that artists started working with. So I'm going to show you the difference. Let's start out with the flats and the brights, because they confuse more people than any other shapes of brushes. You see, flats are the longer brushes that have the square or the flat tip, the square tip. The brights are the shorter ones, the same tip. They have a pretty much, and they're called the same sizes. I mean, in other words, the same size brush will be very much the same, except one is longer than the other. The filberts get their name from the filbert nut, and that's because they have that rounded shape on the end. Let's find a filbert here for you. Well, this is a filbert. You see the rounded shape of the filbert right here. And then there are the rounds. Now, you'll see I have one round in this batch of brushes, and here it is right here. You can tell I never use it. Some artists can do wonderful things with round brushes. For oil painting, I find them totally useless. Except for riggers, and I will go into those in just a moment. Except for riggers, I never use the round brush, and so I have the one round brush in this collection, and that's it. Then there are the fan brushes. Fan brushes came on the scene a little bit later, and they're called fan brushes because they're the shape of a fan, as you can see right there. Then there's the rigger, and the rigger is really a very useful little brush. It's a long, skinny brush. It's also called, a lot of people call them liners. Originally, the liner was the long, skinny brush that had a square tip, and the rigger is the long, skinny brush with a round tip, but people interchange those names. Some people call these liners, some riggers. I prefer rigger because I just like the way it feels in my mouth, that sort of thing. Come in all different sizes, and just like any other brush, some are longer than others. Then, well, of course, we have the long handle and short handle of almost everything. The longer handles are preferable in all brushes for oil painters because that gives us more leverage for applying the paint on the canvas when we have it on an easel. So, but then we have the specialty brushes, and those are the ones that really throw people off. People come up with different things they'll do to brushes to make them do different things, and then we get a specialty brush. One of the specialty brushes that is popular these days is the angled brush, like this. And then there are others, many others. There's so many others that you just go to the brush catalog or go on to the internet, any art supply store. Just look at all the kinds of brushes they have there. They all have special uses. Well, of all these brushes, there are also all kinds of materials they're made of. The traditional brush for oil painting is a hog bristle brush. That's just what I said. It's hog hair. Brushes made of hog hair. And that is really one of the workhorses of all painters. the bristle brush made of a good quality hog hair, a good quality bristle brush. Then there is the goat hair blender. It's very soft hair. I see I've got one here somewhere. Here it is. And it usually when you feel it, you can feel the softness of it. They come in all kinds of shapes. Some are flat, some are round, and their purpose is simply to do very fine blending. Then we have squirrel hair brushes, which are really even more flimsy. Now I think I have a squirrel hair. I'm not really sure, but I think this is what I used to call floppy brush. The hair is so floppy that you have no control over it whatsoever. And then we have the badger hair. Badger hair is very popular hair. The blend of badger hair and synthetic hair, very popular brush in oil painting because it gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you both the stiffness that you get in a bristle brush and the softness you get in the softer brushes. So I don't have a pure badger hair here in this particular collection, but the rosemary brushes that I really favor these days are a blend of the badger hair and synthetic, and well, maybe their secret formula, we don't know. Synthetics are just that. They can be made of any synthetic material. Usually the synthetic brushes like this one are very stiff, and they're very good for doing acrylic. For oils, well, people have different preferences, so I won't say which. And then there are the blends, which I have just mentioned, where the some kind of selection of various kinds of hairs have been blended together in the brush. So yes, I can see how all of that is very confusing. So I think that it's just, well, let me say something else. You've heard me say this before, that Helen Van Wyck, who used to be one of the TV painter teachers, used to say that her teacher said that if you knew what you're doing, you could do it with a broom. So I would not include the broom as one of the brushes, but that's to make a point, and that is, if you know how a brush behaves and what it will do, you'll find you need fewer and fewer brushes. But you might find that you need several sizes. So you see we have lots of sizes to choose from. Very large filbert size here, and then we have a smaller filbert size here. So the larger brushes are better for painting on larger canvases, smaller brushes for smaller canvases, that sort of thing. But if you're just starting out with oil painting, I recommend that you start out just with 2 brushes. And I recommend that those 2 brushes be a hog bristle, a very good brand of hog bristle, that they be a flat and a filbert. So I'm going to circle those so that you don't forget it. To start with, you don't need every single kind of brush there is in the brushes available to us. You just need the ability to get to know what brushes will do. So let's show you just a little bit of a comparison here of what a brush can do, what these 2 brushes can do, and then we can show you something of what they can do that perhaps other brushes will do too. So let's start out with a flat brush, and I'm going to start out with a flat that is a very good grade of hog bristle. Now let me say here that when you're buying your brushes, don't skimp on brushes. That's your tool. If you buy a cheap brush, you're going to get cheap results. The cheap brushes usually will begin, the bristles will begin to curl on the edges, and they'll sometimes fall out of the brush while you're painting. So don't think if you see in one of the craft stores, you see a flat brush for $2, I don't think it would be a good investment for you to get it. So as far as brands go, I could recommend brands all day long. Everybody's got their favorite brand, but I can tell you that the Utrecht brand of a really excellent hog bristle brushes are in a reasonable price range. Of course, these days everybody's going hog wild over rosemary brushes, and this is a rosemary brush, and they do make excellent brushes. But just those two brands are certainly not the only brands that are really, really good quality. So I would say you won't go wrong if you go for the Utrecht brand of the flat and the filbert. As far as size is concerned, I would recommend that you start out just with one. You don't need lots and lots of sizes to begin with. I would suggest that you start out with either number 6 or number 8 of each one of them. So if you wanted to be go ahead and get a 6 and an 8 of both just to start with to discover what your brushes will do, then yes, you could do that, but you really only need those two just to start with. So I want to explore with you just for a moment, especially with the flats and the brights and the filberts, and show you kind of what you can expect and why you've got lots of ability here to explore. So we'll start out with the flat here. So I'm going to pull down onto the palette. It doesn't matter what color I'm using here because I'm just going to show you about brush behavior. So I'm just pulling down. If you want to know what color that is, it's the Rembrandt Transparent Oxide Red, and I'm just going to pull down some white. And this is just to give us a variety of paint to work with. So you see, I'm pulling it down. Now, when you're pulling paint down on your palette, for the brush to behave well, you need plenty. Don't be skimpy with your paint. So here's the flat brush. Now notice what it will do. It has this wonderful chisel edge here, but it also has the ability to bend. So when I'm loading the brush, I will pull it down like this on its edge, and then I can make a stroke. And when I make the stroke, if I have enough paint on the brush, you see it goes, when the stroke goes down, it goes down so that you have an edge, you have a relatively straight edge at the tip, and you can pull it down into any shape you want like that. When you load the brush with enough paint so that you cause those bristles to sort of stick together on the end there of the flat brush, then you have the ability to come down with a relatively straight, thin line. If you load the brush with a little bit more paint, the flat brush, you can get something like that. Or if you come up this way, you can get something like that. Then, if you don't have quite so much paint on the brush, say, loosen it up just a little bit, and when you load it by pushing the back bristles. You see what I'm doing here? Can you see I'm pulling just the back bristles up into the paint so that it's not quite so skinny on the tip? Then you can get it to do things like this, where you could do, if you can imagine, grasses or fur or stuff like that. So, and of course you can, let me just do a little bit of a mixing here between them. You can, of course, make the brush do other things for you, the flat brush. You can make the brush do other things for you, like when you're applying paint. You can apply the paint, you can stroke over the paint and get it relatively smooth, relatively quickly, like that. Or you can apply the paint with less pressure, like this, and you can get little textures in the paint. So that's just a beginning of what this flat brush can do. Because it has the ability to be flexible like this, you can push it and enable, when you're pushing it, enable it to create shapes of various kinds, textures of various kinds. Now, the bright is not quite so flexible. It's a more specific type brush. It doesn't have the length or the spring in it that the flat brush has. Now, to show you an example, if I'm loading the bright, and then I can get a very specific edge, a much sharper edge. You see right here, a much sharper edge than I can get with the flat brush. However, I can get that edge with the flat brush if I load the paint just right. But what I want to show you here is that the bright doesn't have the flexibility and the ability to do the kinds of things for you that the flat brush does. So therefore, wait until later to add it to your collection. That's the idea. So it will do things like you can get the nice line, nice edge, or that nice straight line you can get with the bright, and you can. But you can't. You don't have the power or the blending power with the bright brush that you have with the flat brush. So you can see it has more limitations than the flat brush does. The filbert is a good workhorse. It's if you only had enough money to buy just one brush, maybe the filbert would be a better one for you to start out with. So the filbert is a good blending brush and a good shaping brush. So let me load the filbert here. You see the filberts usually, now there are some filberts that are shorter, kind of like the bright, but this traditional filbert, you see it gives you a different kind, oh, there's loose hair there, it gives you a different kind of blend. You can get a really smooth blend with the filbert, just like you can get with the flat. You see the rounded edge that the filbert gives you right there, whereas the flat gives you the more straight edge. With the filbert you get the more rounded edge like this. But you also get that ability with the filbert to get various kinds of rounded shapes within the paint itself. So let's see if we can get that just a little bit, pull some more of that paint down. Get that just a little bit darker and show you what I'm talking about. So something like, it's a really good brush for doing foliage. So you can get that sort of indistinct, those indistinct edges that the flat brush, you can get good foliage with the flat brush, but the filbert can give you a more flexibility for the sort of rounded shapes that you can get when you're interpreting various kinds of foliage. So you can see that sort of like that. The filbert also will allow you to do the straight lines. So if you pull the paint, pull it to the tip, and just use the tip of the brush, you can do the straight lines with it. So I would say that the first thing you want to do when you get those two brushes, or those two I recommend, the first thing you want to do, it would explore all the things that it can do. It's not just a paint applicator. All the brushes, they're not just paint applicators, but they're tools. And they're tools that can give you certain results, and their limitations. There are certain things that a filbert can't do that a flat can do, or there are certain things that a flat can do that a filbert can't do. So those two. Now, the flat has that ability, as I said before, to give you those kinds of textures for grass and stuff. The filbert is limited there, in that it can you're able, if you push it and then pull upward, you're able to get those kind of short type grasses, but it won't really give you the separation that the flat will give you, the separation of the bristles that allows that paint just to continue to flow up and give you what you might need for tall grasses or hair or stuff like that. Now, a lot of people prefer the fan brush for this sort of thing here. And we have a quick tip about the fan brush that you can use there to kind of explore what the fan brush can do. But this is just a little bit of an introduction to say, all the brushes that are available to you, you don't need but two. If you really want to get started in oil painting, if you start out with those two and give them a full exploration, and once you reach the point that you feel that you have control of those, then my advice is to begin to expand your collection of brushes, one brush at a time. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.